Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee's meeting for Tuesday, November 12th, 2024 at 10 a.m. We're convening the session via Zoom. To call this meeting to order, and I'll read our little statement before we get going. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you, and take care not to share your device's screen. Everything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all devices and phones. For items with public comment, after committee members have finished their discussion on an agenda item, the chair will afford members of the public up to 3 minutes to speak. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their name and any affiliations. To give public comment, you must be recognized by the chair and speak to the chair. There is to be no crosstalk with others in attendance. To be recognized for making a public comment, use the raise hand feature by clicking on the reactions tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then click on the raise hand button. When you've finished your comment, please click the lower hand button. It's important for me to note that PRAC isn't required by law to take public comment. We do so because we need your invaluable input. We view public comment as a privilege, so please remain respectful in your comments and do not disparage others or the members of this committee. Okay. All right. We have here. Can I see everybody? Gallery. That's better. Okay. Let's do the roll call of members. Doug Rose.
Here.
Tim Brain.
Here.
Gary Beller.
Here.
Joanna Roach.
Here.
Sarah Boyce.
Here.
Jen Carberg.
Here.
Matt Fee.
Here.
Okay, and staff. Leah Cabral.
Here.
I'm sorry, Leah Hill. That was a slip. Sorry.
It's okay. I'll answer both. Leah, I'm here.
Okay. We don't have any anticipated speakers, so we'll go to public comment. If there's any members of the public that wish to make a comment on anything that's not on today's agenda, now's your chance. You can have 3 minutes. Okay, hearing none. Approval of minutes of October 8th.
I'll move approval.
It's Matt.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the October 8th minutes from Doug Rose and a second from Matt Fee. Roll call vote. Doug Rose.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Gary Beller.
Aye.
Joanna Roach.
Aye.
Sarah Boyce. Jen Carberg.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay. Review and approve Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee's third quarterly report. Go ahead, Leah.
Thanks, Peter. Let me just pull it up. Just do the packet.
Peter, while you're there, just a point of order. If we have questions on any aspect, should we pop in while she's going through it, or do we wait to the end?
How long is it going to be, Leah?
Maybe 10 or 15 minutes, maybe less.
I don't know, in the interest of time, I think you could pop in as long as we're not going to have a breakdown discussion on that item, and it's going to keep us going for hours, you know.
No. Okay, gotcha.
So,
thanks.
Use your discretion.
All right.
I get someone just let me know if someone has a question, because I'm not sure if I'll be able to see you when I share my screen. Okay, so this is the third quarter report from July to September of 2024. The first couple slides are going to be just sort of a recap on the coastal resilience projects that have been taking place, and that was requested by Brooke Moore. So just wanted to let you all know. So Francis Street Beach Improvement Project, that we just are finishing the pre-design phase, and that consists of soil borings, which happened last week, percolation tests to see what the depth to groundwater is. And there will be in one of the areas where the artist colonies were, there'll be a monitoring well there so that we can know what the depth to groundwater is in real time over time as well. And then stormwater investigations. We'll be starting the schematic design phase. So that's the 30% design from November to March of 2025. Over the summer, we held an abutter and community engagement event. And we also had a virtual community open house, or we will after the holidays. The Washington Street Collaborative Work Group has been working on this project, and they meet every second and fourth Friday at 11 a.m. That's open to the public. So you can either come via Zoom or to the Land Bank conference room. You all had a presentation on the Easy Street Flood Mitigation Project by Arcadis. So they reviewed the risk assessment findings, which again are about $1.2 billion in damages from now through 2070. Arcadis developed 5 concept design alternatives to reduce flooding. And so the alternatives are below. Obviously, you can't see them that well because they're very small, but from the community engagement event, that we heard a lot of feedback from the community saying just elevate Easy Street. So we made an alternative for that as well. And elevating Easy Street, that it sounds easy, but it is extremely complicated when you get into the nitty gritty of it. So we also had lots of meetings with town departments, community and stakeholder engagement meetings to refine these alternatives. And we'll be having a second open house this winter, probably after the holidays in January maybe, and going over the refined alternatives. So that's that. Oops. And then this is just a page about what we heard from the engagement events and who we engaged. The Resilience Open House, that goes over that, you all know that. We had over 115 attendees come for the morning and afternoon session. It was a great turnout. Okay, so now we're getting into the actual quarterly report. Peter is the chair, Sarah is the vice chair, and then co-secretaries Tim Brain and Rachel Freeman, but now Doug is the co-chair. You approved that September as a climate change awareness month, I think for the 4th year in a row. Sarah wrote a great article in yesterday's Island about crack. You had multiple presentations, and then lots of discussions revolving around updating the town zoning bylaw on how to incorporate coastal resiliency. You had a presentation on the Flood Rover or Climate Central's endeavor. So that was basically they're going from Maine to Texas to take real-time LiDAR elevations, pictures to be able to visualize flooding during the different scenarios. And then these are some of the pictures that they took from Nantucket and used AI and the different depths from the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model for each storm year to be able to visualize that. I gave a status update on the Coastal Resilience Plan recommendations. So about half of the recommendations are either in development, underway, or complete or ongoing. Not going to go through all these, but that's what the statuses are now. You had a discussion on planning board and town regulations with coastal resiliency in mind. So again, this is a high priority within the CRP. Leslie Snell and Paul Murphy came to explain the zoning bylaw and the Massachusetts building code. And then you've spent lots of meetings discussing this. Again, we'll be discussing it again this meeting. So the next steps would be to refine the list of suggestions, and then and also coastal resiliency will be added to the updated town's master plan. So in the future, they will come to a crack meeting to discuss that. You gave input onto the Nantucket Harbor's action plan update. So you got to give input and then review the draft and offer suggestions based on the different questions they asked. And the next steps for that is to incorporate your edits to the draft and then put that out for comment to the public. Then you had an update on the Nantucket Harbor sediment transport and dredge plan, and you got to see some cool models with that, and then offer any suggestions of where you think should get dredged, and then what to do with the beneficial reuse. We had kind of a brief discussion on the funding mechanisms for the CRP projects, and I let you all know that this is one of the select board strategic plan objectives, is to incorporate the recommendations of the CRP in conjunction with other capital planning. Some of the ideas generated by CRAC during that discussion were that the funding mechanism needs to be a constant sustainable fee, like the land bank fee is, a component of a stabilization fund, increase beach sticker price, and a percentage goes into a coastal resilience fund. And Matt had suggested you need to put numbers to the list to see what is actually worth pursuing. There's always grants, the current betterment system, create a resilience fund within the community foundation so people can donate money there and have it as a tax write-off, leverage private-public partnerships and make it a bit easier and streamlined, and then work with consultants or professionals to develop funding recommendations. For public outreach, again, we post every Thursday on NRD social media. You had an article about in yesterday's Island, and then there were multiple discussions with Acclimate regarding them helping us with the social media campaign. Okay, so this is where I need some input, is requests and recommendations. So this page, this is the end of the presentation, and this is where CRAC is either requesting or recommending things to the select board. I think in one of the discussions about funding was to see if we can hire a professional to really get into this funding piece. But if any of you remember from July to September, any recommendations that should be added to here, please let me know. And if you have any edits or questions, we can open up that now.
I go with something, I'm not sure if it could happen, but something from Shannon's presentation at the October 22nd meeting that sticks out. She mentioned, I think on the Cape, that they might have a floodplain administrator. And I don't know if that falls under you, Leah, but that sounded interesting to me.
Yeah, so that can be in the next quarterly report. This is just from July through September.
Okay.
Do we want to add in the funding piece as a recommendation or request?
Yes.
Okay, here, one yes from Peter. Are there any? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I agree. By the way, it's a really good report.
Thank you, Tim. Are there any other requests or recommendations to add?
Matt, did you have any questions?
Yeah, this is Matt. Just, no, I don't have any questions. I think the sand sourcing, that'll bring up questions of where are we? Why are we doing it in the order that we're doing it in? How far along are we? I think that'll be asked by the public.
Sarah, go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks. One just point of clarification. I know, Leah, when you were showing this morning, you said in the beginning that the first few projects were updates that were sort of requested. And while the select board knows this, I think because it's open to the public, obviously, I would just be really clear that those first two projects, are supported by the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee or come out of the Coastal Resiliency Plan, but those aren't our projects. I think that's one thing that has come up, we've noticed when we talked before about understanding what CRAC does or does not do. And I would, I think just making that very clear, not to separate us completely, just because we've had people come to our meetings in the past to talk about specific projects that we maybe don't have any control over. I just want to make sure that there's like a little bit of clarification. But I think the report's great. And I think obviously from the select board perspective, you kind of want to hear everything that's going on in the resiliency field all at once too.
Yes, I will definitely make that clear.
Thanks.
So I have a question, Peter.
Yes, go
The
ahead,
question
Gary.
is, what is that logo at the bottom right hand of the screen? What is it? What is that supposed to mean, and where did it come from?
Leah,
So I found that on my computer. I think Vince had it. And I know a couple years ago, the town kind of had this Act Local campaign when we were trying to switch over from plastic straws to like paper straws, more environmentally friendly. And I'm guessing that came from that movement, but I will have to ask Vince to give me that input. This was so when before Mary left CRAC, she had put one of these presentations together, and so that logo was on there.
Well, why are we using it? There's nothing to do with our committee.
Well, it's coastal resiliency on the bottom.
I know,
I don't
but
know. Would you like it removed?
well, it's not something that we are asking the public to focus on or to try to tune into or to locate. I just don't know what it's doing there.
Okay.
So
I
Leah,
can replace it with the first logo on the
what
first
does that-
page.
Leah, what does the hashtag take you to though? Is it a hashtag that you would use on social media and that takes you somewhere, gives you information?
I think it was a hashtag for for the different town initiatives that were kind of like environmentally friendly or coastal resiliency related.
Because if it had, maybe it could be a logo we could have everywhere, but just not with so much prominence. And if the hashtag was more relevant and took people to only coastal resilience themed efforts or whatever that we're working on, the town's working on, then I could see it sticking around. But I understand what Gary's saying about what's that doing there.
So I can replace it with your CRAC logo or a QR code for the CRAC webpage.
Joanna?
If you go on Act Local on Instagram, it turns up a town account, but it doesn't seem to be explicitly having to do with coastal resiliency.
Okay, so there if we're gonna have this reappear,
It seems like a disconnect.
if you're gonna have it reappear, it seems like coastal resilience at the bottom conflicts with the hashtag at the top. So the hashtag at the top maybe should be strictly coastal resilience. So maybe it could be hashtag crack. And
I don't know
Okay.
about that.
well, we won't put a K on it, Joanna. Anyway. Yeah, I agree, Gary.
Okay, so are you asking me to see if we can change the hashtag, or do you want to replace that with the crack logo and or a QR code to the crack towns or crack webpage?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Act Local is not taking us anywhere that has relevance to coastal resilience. So if you do what you just said.
Okay, replace it
Yeah,
with crack logo and
Yeah.
QR code. Okay,
because that's what we're talking about here. We definitely don't need to be starting to confuse people anymore as we attempt to do public outreach, better public outreach.
okay, I can change that.
And I had one other question relating to requests and recommendations. I know that in past meetings and stuff, we've talked about our desire that the town have should be looking for someone to be a grant writer for the kind of grants that might be available for coastal resiliency. Is that something in the works, or is that something that we need to request the select board to continue to focus on? I'm trying to remember if that's in the current budget recommendations. I think it might be.
Joanna?
It was in the budget for last year, a certain amount, I think it was $200,000 was in the budget for support with getting grants, but I think it was across the board. So I don't think I think it would be a good idea to add that in here. Uh-oh, you're
I
frozen.
think Peter's frozen.
Ma'am? No,
No, you're not.
just sitting very still, that's all.
Did you hear what I said or no?
Leah, did you hear?
Yes, Joanna had said that $200,000 was in the budget for last year for assistance with grant writing, but not a specific position within the town. And she suggested that it should be added in as a recommendation.
Okay.
I do not recall if it was brought up during one of the meetings from July to September. But if it wasn't, then I guess you could vote if you want to include it or not.
I feel like we bring it up every time we talk about how we're going to finance anything.
Okay. So a specific grant writer position.
Or money allocated specifically to coastal resiliency grants.
Okay.
This is Matt.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, Peter, I have an observation on that. If we bring it up generally again, and the select board is just thinking about it generally, it will probably, if it's not specific enough, we'll probably be talking about it again in half a year or a year. I think what we've seen is when it is baked into the department, it works. Like when we look at NRTA, they've been pursuing grants for their department and they've received a ton of money. So I kind of think that the request should, I don't know how to, I know the departments don't have time or don't have anyone can do it, etc. Somehow we've got to break the logjam. So, because it's one thing to put money for grants, it's another to say which grants and who's going to do it and who's going to be responsible to make sure it happens. So however we recommend it, should be recommending that we've, who, what, when, where, how are they gonna do it, should be in the recommendation, or we should be recommending the select board figure out how to put that in, or it's gonna stagnate.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about a recommendation that's gonna become it's gonna go into it's gonna be on the warrant for town meeting, included in the budget for the next fiscal year. Is that what we're talking about?
Can I say
Yeah,
something?
yep. Go
So
ahead.
I agree with Matt, and I think maybe the thing to do would be to it costs somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 to write a big federal grant, right? And so I think Matt's right. We should specifically say, we'd like to pursue state and federal grants, and we're looking for, let's just say, $50,000 allocated to the Natural Resources Department so that they can, because that's Leah's department, so that they can pursue grants that support coastal resiliency. I mean, I think that's entirely reasonable.
But I'm just looking at the mechanism. Do we have to create a town meeting article to make this happen, or does this become
I
part
think
of
they
the?
can put it in their budget, right? And then
Okay.
hire a grants consultant. I mean, I definitely know a few people who could do this, right? And so I think if we say allocate $50,000 to hire a grants consultant in the natural resources budget for FY 26.
Okay, I like it. Go ahead, Jen.
Thank you. I completely agree with what Joanna just said, and I think that this is the stumbling block, and I think Leo will probably agree to it. It's the capacity for going after grants like this. There's a secondary piece to it, which is then managing the project when you get it. But I think an easier ask right now, and see what people think, is not so much let's hire another person into natural resources that can go after grants and then do the administrative pieces. It's get the consultant so we can attempt a few of these grants, and then if we're successful, it takes a little bit of time to do that. I think the step after that is then funding for someone that's actually helping manage and administrate and continuing to go after grants. But I think I agree with what Joanna just said. I think that's the way to do it.
So Leah, we want to add this to our recommendations coming up later in the meeting, or are you saying recommendations that are within your third quarter report? Is that what we're saying?
So this would be recommendations within the third quarter report to
Well,
give to the select board.
So let's add that.
Okay, can you
Can Joanna
repeat how you want me to write it?
Can Joanna and Jen wordsmith this for Leah on the fly?
I think so.
Go ahead, Joanna. You had it, I thought.
Okay. Request $50,000 for grants consultant to be added to the Natural Resource Department budget for the purpose of submitting grants to the federal and state government to support coastal resiliency.
Or hiring a consultant to search
That's-
out and apply for grants, yeah.
Apply for grants.
Yeah.
And should we also include applying to grants from private nonprofits? Is that outside of the town?
I think that if we focus, the big money grants are coming from the state and from the federal government right now. And if those grants cost between $5,000 and $10,000 to apply for. So if we could focus on that, I think we'll get a better, one, we'll certainly get some feedback that would be helpful. And two, I think part of what I've learned about this is that we have the opportunity to be early to the table, right? Lots of other communities are not as far along as we are in terms of pursuing these grants, especially in the federal level. So I think that would be a good place to start.
Okay. Does it sound good, Leah?
Yep, I can put it in there and talk to Jeff and Vince about it as well. But yeah, I do want to, I agree with what Jen said, that getting grants is great, but it's the capacity. So right now I'm at full capacity. So it would have to be, for like the next stage of a current project that I'm
yeah.
working at.
Yep.
Can I ask a follow-up, Peter?
Yes, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, just to Leah, I know we just, talked all about this as something going on in your department, and I appreciate you mentioning, the capacity and the ability to manage grants. Is something like this actually useful? Or is there another iteration of funding like this that would be helpful in going after grant money?
I would have to think about it. So we have had consultants will sometimes do, help with grants pro bono. So I think it could be helpful. I think the timing is where, where we would have to figure it out.
And it may not be a full-time position, it may be part-time. If it's just going to focus on crack, on coastal resilience. So might be another way to sell it. Or limited hours or whatever. I guess that's part-time. So do we have any, thanks for everyone's help in getting this onto the third quarter report. Does anyone else have any more comments or questions in general on the report?
It was very good.
Yes, it was.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Doug.
Thanks, Peter. Leah, just a thought as you're presenting. If a question comes up from anybody in the select board or elsewhere about how we're intending to approach the updating of the zoning regulations, I guess one thing I would bear in mind is, as we've discussed as a group, I don't think anybody here is suggesting that we're in a mad rush to get this into the May 2025 all-town meeting. I think that was one of the reservations I heard in 2 meetings ago, maybe it was 1 meeting ago, from Megan Trudell. She cautioned us that we're too late to make that ATM meeting. And I don't think anybody's suggesting that we're going to try to rush this through. This is going to be something that we're going to be very deliberate about. And the other thing was, I don't know if it was during was it before the end of September, but we did discuss limited liability and the whole idea of the town reevaluating the possibility of another warrant article that would shift responsibility from the town to individual developers and property owners. And I continue to believe there's a lot of interest in this group. I know personally I have a lot of interest in that. And I don't know that it would hurt or help, but I guess I'd be inclined to remind the select board that that's something we want to take a hard look at. If I recall correctly, both in 2015 and 2019, the reservations that were expressed by the planning board that led them to not endorse it had all to do with, this is a complex issue and it requires further study, so we don't endorse it. And I think all we're saying is, okay, let's study it and not try to get it done on some arbitrary timeline where we're in a mad scramble. This is going to take some time to flesh it out. So those are just 2 sort of maybe sound bites that you might want to have in your back pocket if those kinds of things come up. I guess the question I should ask is, does the group feel comfortable in mentioning the discussion around limited liability as part of our third quarter update? I'll leave it to the rest of the group to decide that. Thanks.
Go ahead, Leah.
So that presentation and discussion was in October. So this is just July to September. So that will be in the fourth quarter report.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anything else? Any other comments or questions?
Didn't we actually talk about it in the third quarter, although we didn't have Rick Atherton until, I recall we've been talking about that waiver thing for quite a while. And I hate to just keep pushing it off for another few months. I mean, is Leah correct that we didn't talk about it at all in the third quarter? I thought we've been talking about it for quite a while. It just so happened that the meeting that Rick was at was in October, but I'm quite convinced we spoke about it in the prior quarter.
Go ahead, Matt.
That's why we had Rick in October.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, here's a suggestion on that. If we could say we talked about it and give it to the select board and they could say, oh yeah, we talked about it and someone has to do something. But maybe we should talk about it more in this next quarter, figure out who has to do, what has to be figured out. You know, who has to do the work, what work needs to be done, who's gonna do it, and try to like, try to put some parameters around it so we get somewhere with it. Would be my suggestion. I don't think we need to bring it up in this report. But, you know, I just know town staff and select board are not gonna drop everything they're doing to try to figure this out, that we need to find a way to figure out who's gonna figure it out, if that makes any sense.
Yes, definitely.
All
Go
right,
ahead,
thank
Leah.
you.
Thanks, Peter. It is in the scope for the strategic retreat and relocation plan is to have legal counsel look into that and see, you know, what can happen and how do you do it, if you can do it. So I would just leave it at that.
Sound good, Gary?
Well, okay, it just slows us down a little bit, but if that's the only way we can get it done, I guess that's how we'll have to go.
We are long-range planners, so
But I'm 85, 86 years old, so I'm not a long-range thinker. I'm a short-termer thinker.
well, you get 10, 20 years at least, Gary, at least. Okay, I'll take a motion if there's nothing else to approve the third quarter report.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second,
Okay, I have your motion in a second. Roll call vote. Joanna,
Aye.
Doug,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Jen,
Aye.
Matt,
chair
votes aye. All right, thank you, everybody. Okay, so refined suggestions to incorporate coastal resiliency into the zoning bylaw. Are you going to put that up, Leah? Okay, but it's in the packet.
Peter, do you want me to explain a little bit of what is in
Sure.
the packet and okay,
Yep.
and my thought process? So in your packet, you had a document that says list of crack suggestions for updating Nantucket zoning and land use regulations. You had the first version that had a bunch of comments on the side from Shannon. What I did then, the next document is I took Shannon's comments and kind of reoriented the list because a lot of them fall under if the model floodplain overlay district zoning bylaw, the higher standards is passed, then it incorporates a lot of those suggestions that are within the CRP. So what I did was kind of reorganize the list from the CRP and what was generated by CRAC through all those meetings. And what you have here on screen is like the clean version. So that's what you're seeing here. I see Doug has his hand up.
Go ahead, Doug.
Thanks, Peter. Leah, thank you for the explanation. I'll be honest, I got lost in all the attachments, and my suggestion was going to be to do what you've just done, which is to try to take all the different iterations of these lists and run them through the Shannon Holst filter, and it sounds like you've done understand that. So thank you for doing that work. Further confession, I think I need to spend more time really looking at this and fully digesting it to have any helpful input at this stage. But I appreciate the fact you've done this work. I was going to volunteer to try to do it myself, but thank you. If you've already done it, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, and to take further what Doug said, you have to, if you have the capability, split your screen on your computer and, look at what Shannon did and look at the coastal resilience plan, and then if you could triple it, you have to look at the actual code, and it's considering we have the as we all say, not enough bandwidth to always focus on all the things we want. It takes time to see the similarities and condense it down, and so this is great what you did, Leah. Actually did a lot of our work for us, but it's a place to jump off from, for sure. Go ahead, Doug.
I had to build on what you just said, Peter. I also think Shannon Hulst's presentation was one of the best, if not the best, that I've experienced in my time on CRAG. And the thought occurred to me as she was speaking to us at that meeting. She was giving us the kind of quality input that I would hope to get from someone like an Arcadis, who would charge us, many tens of thousands of dollars. I don't know if Shannon did this pro bono, but it was time very well spent. And having gone through that process, I guess I would just add to what Peter said. I think we have a really good, solid starting point now. I think we can approach the planning staff with confidence that there's some meat on these bones here. I do think personally I would like to spend a little more time scrutinizing it and making sure I fully understand everything that's being suggested. But I just want to say, I think as much as people may be fearful that we've been spinning wheels, I think we've gotten a really solid foundation here. Thanks.
And I think that it was important for us to go through this exercise so we are more fluent in what we're trying to do. I know it's an easy thing to say. We want to just put it off on the various regulatory boards, but they're all too busy, and we are, we're the ground roots. We are refining it so that we can eventually give it to them and eventually give it to the voters. So yeah, you're right, Doug. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this? Any additions? Any moving around of priorities on here? And Leah, is this a list of priorities 1 through, or is it just put them where you could put them?
Yeah, it's not a hierarchy. I guess we could just put it as bullets, but yeah.
Okay.
I think that could be also an exercise for CRAC to do, is to make them, number 1 is the most important and then go down, but that's up to you all.
Go ahead, Doug.
I'm just going to raise my hand if nobody else does. I did have one reservation, and maybe I'm too late to the party on this, but the discussion around limited liability or waivers excusing the town from responsibility in developing in at-risk areas. I know there's been some discussion, maybe there's already a consensus around this that's too late to change, that somehow that should belong in the retreat and relocation strategy. I personally feel like it will need to be addressed in the zoning regulations at some point. And if our goal here is to present to the planning board a comprehensive list of recommendations, I don't know why we would segregate that out as a separate request. I would argue that it belongs as part of our list. I also understand Vince had raised a concern that there was somehow already some state laws that related to this, and I think we'd asked if he might be able to provide that. I've looked and I can't find anything, but I'm no expert on Massachusetts state law regarding building. But I think at minimum we ought to keep it on the list and not arbitrarily say, well, we're going to get to that later. I think it could very well find its way into whatever recommendation we make to the planning board in the next, say, few months. I don't know what everyone feels about that.
Anyone else?
Yes,
As we're all
Matt.
looking.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I
Matt.
can agree with Doug. We've got to think of, how I would have to think of how to, where to put it in this set of documents, or are we exploring it? Are we recommending it in some manner. If state is, if state isn't sufficient, you have to think of how to position it.
Agree.
And how it's going to be perceived. And we have to make sure we give a good explanation of what a zoning overlay district is in relation to a CRD, because people will confuse that when it comes down to actually creating a CRD, which hasn't been created yet. Okay, we're all pretty quiet today.
Peter, the only thought I have is that although we're certainly for this waiver of liability stuff, question is, most of what we're looking at on the screen now is zoning. And that could be, it either could be completely separate from zoning. Do we think that as part of the change of zoning laws, something relating to limiting liability of the town ought to be in a zoning law? Because it doesn't sound to me like that's normally what goes into zoning type of regulation. So that's why it's probably not in there yet. And that's why it's somewhat separate, because most of this is about zoning, not about limiting liability.
Well, I'm thinking it's the thing that's triggered as the water comes up. It's the properties inland you don't have to worry about, but the properties on the front lines, as the water comes in, then maybe, and of course zoning underlies all of that, as does Conservation Commission and HDC. But then the water comes closer, and maybe that triggers something that's, even though it's not in zoning, it's outside. I think it's all interrelated. I think it has to be all connected. Hope I'm making sense.
I just don't know if I've ever seen any zoning law that gets into some of these tangential issues, as important as they are, and we all think they're important. I'm just not sure it belongs in a zoning law.
I think we haven't seen it because we haven't had this circumstance coming at us, and so we haven't had to adapt to it yet. So maybe we need somebody, maybe we need our town council to tell us if that's something that can happen. Go ahead, Doug.
Thanks, Peter. And Gary, you may be right. I'm certainly no expert in this area. I guess what I was reacting to was when we've heard from the planning department, we've also heard from the building department as well. And I think the premise that I'm approaching the whole limited liability discussion with is what Rick Atherton initially suggested or was asking was that any new development that was occurring in an area that is known to be at risk, before a building permit can be issued, there needs to be a waiver signed. It's as simple as that. And whether that's a zoning bylaw change, is that part of a package of zoning bylaw updates, or is that something entirely separate? Sitting here today, I don't know. And I guess that's why I'm questioning, why would we segregate that and set it off to the side as part of a retreat and relocation plan, as opposed to part of the holistic look at how do we update our zoning and building regulations, land use regulations. Think about it more broadly. Land use regulations need to be updated to incorporate knowledge of coastal resilience issues. Check. Where does that fit? Is that a building law change? Is that a zoning law? I don't know, but I would say it's every bit as important as any number of the other things that are on that list in the CRP, because it might begin to slow down the process that we're in now, which is continued development in areas that we know will be subject to flood risk, erosion risk, so on and so forth. So I hope I'm making sense. I don't feel like it's wise for us to separate that idea such that it potentially gets delayed many more years. If we have a chance to go at the planning department and say, here's something we want to accomplish, tell us where it belongs, then Maybe, Leah, what I'm saying is rather than framing this as a zoning bylaw update, it's a land use regulation update. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm
It
talking
makes-
into the ether.
No, it makes sense to me. It's kind of, we're sort of talking through it to come down to something that's coherent, and
Yes.
it's in sort of the same vein as when someone is developing something and the planning board says we need an escrow account to cover any collateral damage that happens from what you're doing, and which sort of covers the town or whoever. It sounds like it's in that vein, and it's not necessarily an actual zoning, a part of the zoning law, but it's sort of outside it and connected to it. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Yeah. Yes. Think so.
Except remember that to get a zoning law passed, you need 2/3. You need a different vote, and the waiver we could have passed if it had passed town meeting. I think a majority was all that was necessary. So you could have put that into effect with a mere majority, and putting it into a zoning law means there's a much higher threshold needed for getting that passed.
I mean, I agree with you, Gary, but then it's that much that it's makes it that much stronger. Anyway, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I'm sorry to keep going back and forth, Peter, and thank you for acknowledging me. And Gary, you may be dead on right. I'm with you. If there's a path of least resistance, let's pursue it.
Yeah.
I'm only saying that the way this is written right now, we have decided in advance to treat this as a separate topic that fits under a retreat and relocation plan. When the reality is right now, we're discussing what ways do the land use regulations of Nantucket need to be updated. And I think this fits squarely into that discussion. How does it get deployed? How does it get approved is an open question. And I think you're right to ask it. But you follow the part that is on the screen now that's highlighted. That's not the part I'm really challenging. I'm challenging the very first phrase, included in scope for retreat and relocation plan. Why? What does that have to do with retreat and relocation? We're saying before you build anything in an area that's at risk, you need to sign a waiver. And is that part of a zoning bylaw thing that takes 2/3, or is it part of a simpler thing that can only be passed by majority? I don't know. I'm just saying, let's not delay it. That's all. Sorry, I'm shutting up now.
Well, I don't know about that. For now you are, but you'll be back. Anyone else want to join this conversation? Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I'm beginning to understand this stuff. It's very complicated and I'm not very experienced in it, but I tend to agree with what Doug's saying. I think this is a separate issue from retreat and relocation and should be in this list because it does have everything to do with the risks that happen in flood zones and so on. So I guess I'm essentially agreeing with Doug.
Okay. So what do you guys want to do then?
Well, I'm a little bit confused. So Doug is
That's the only one.
suggesting that we take out the idea of the waiver, or where is he wanting to put it somewhere else in the suggestion list?
Doug?
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Joanna. Yeah, what I'm challenging is the idea that the waiver idea somehow needs to be segregated apart from the rest of the list of suggestions we have for updating our land use regulations. I think it is part and parcel of our suggestions. It's going to require some more study, but to direct answer to your questions, no, I'm not suggesting that we walk away from waivers. I'm trying to say, how do we get waivers to happen?
But
And
Doug,
Okay.
waivers isn't in, if you take a look at number 1 that we're looking at on the screen, there's nothing about waivers. Why are you talking about waivers? There's nothing about waivers in there, or under number 2, or under number 3. Why do you think it's included in there? I don't see it.
you're right. I'm sorry,
It's not
Gary.
there. It's not there.
Right. You're
But
right.
we
I was
do-
wrong.
Okay,
But wait a second, though,
one at a time and through me.
Peter.
So go ahead, Joanna.
So, because I understand the waiver piece, and I do think it's important. But it does need to be, if it's gonna be here, it should be a specific bullet point, is what you're trying to say. And what you're making the argument, maybe, Doug, that including the scope of return. Is that it has to be included implicitly in number one, but yet it isn't directly on the list.
Gary, can I go? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Peter,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No,
I
go
forgot
ahead,
who I'm
Doug.
talking to. Yeah, I think I agree with both of you. A closer look at this, number one is not at all what I'm recommending or suggesting. So kudos, correct. I'm asking, can we include in the list of suggestions the idea that we should explore means by which anyone who wants to develop in any way a piece of property which we know to be in a at-risk area must first get or must first provide a waiver of responsibility. Okay, so they're taking the risk as the owner. It's the buyer or builder beware idea. Okay, number one, the way it was written there really didn't address that. It was a separate topic, and I guess I just didn't look at it most closely. And include it in there explicitly as we can, without any other caveats. Oh, this has to be part of a retreat and relocation thing that we'll do next year. I'm saying let's include it in this list. That's all. I hope that makes sense.
Yes,
But- yes,
crystal
thanks.
clear, crystal clear now.
Yep.
I just wanted to kind of point to something from Shannon's presentation in the building codes section. And at the bottom of these bullet points, she has no new construction seaward of the high tide line, limited exceptions for historic structures. So she's kind of taking it
A different
know,
way, yeah.
taking it a different way, but it's pretty explicit, you know. I mean, and the high tide line is going to move inland as the water comes up. So there's going to have to be, for what we want to do with Doug's suggestion, there's going to have to be some flexibility considering what the water line is going to be, the rack line, the high tide line. So I mean, I'm always going to point to that house that's on Loretta Lane, second to last house at the end of it. And it's right in, it's got to be in the floodplain. And it didn't look like they put it up any higher that they're supposed to. And if this was in place, they would have had to have signed a waiver. And I don't know, just anyway.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Peter,
Sarah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Matt. Will you be next? Go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks, Pete. So I feel like I'm catching up a bit on this because I was confused by the 3 different documents in the packet and how they work together. I appreciate Leah's description now. It makes sense. So I wasn't really sure what we were going with all 3 of these documents. So my kind of taking a step back question is, what are we doing with this document? Are we presenting this to the select board, or are we using it as a guidance document to like help us think about what the next steps are in like how we pursue any of this? I think it helps me anyway, think about the wording that we're using and, you know, if it's like how specific we have to be. And I don't feel like I have the expertise, but that's why I really appreciate all the expertise that we've had come to us and help us understand this. And so I guess I'm just asking what our next step with this is, because I have a bigger question about the top suggestions versus the other suggestions, and like, do they get incorporated all together, and what number 1 on the top versus what number 1 on the bottom. That's where I was actually confused with just the conversation we were just having about number 1. And I also don't have 2 screens, so I'm trying to go back and forth between what we're looking at and what was in the packet and what, anyway, so I find this a little bit confusing. So I would like the answer to my questions, but then also are we like voting on this? Because I feel like I definitely need more time to absorb what we're doing before we go further.
Do you want to help her out, Leah, a bit, and then I'll go to Matt?
Sure. So Sarah, the last, I think 3 or 4, maybe 5 meetings, you have been creating this list. So to explain it, the top part, it says from the CRP, 1 through 11 are all within the CRP, that section of updating zoning bylaws. So that's what the top part is. The bottom part is what was not explicitly called out in the CRP, but through all those meetings, you all have generated these other suggestions of incorporating into land use regulations. So that's where that comes from. As far as number 1 under other suggestions, number 1 under the CRP, I had mentioned before, this is not a hierarchy. It's just the way that, like, these could be changed to bullets if you all want to. You could decide to prioritize them as well. It's up to you. And then once you all finalize this list, then it would go to planning staff to use as like a guidance document on how to update zoning regulations, bylaws, etc., and what they think can or cannot happen. Does that answer all your questions?
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Okay.
So it is more like a recommendation for us, and how I mean, I knew we were generating this and we've been working on it. I just was trying to figure out what the next steps are, if it's something that the select board has to approve before it goes to staff, or is it like we can be like, these are our recommendations?
Yeah, it would be your recommendations to staff.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it'll be our recommendation to staff, and hopefully it would go to planning board. We will still have to advocate. I think there'll be, if they have public hearings and discuss it, we will still have a role. Because there'll be a lot of other people probably who either won't understand or will be trying to maybe go a different direction with parts of it. So I think, we're not out of the woods, but I think, I agree with all the stuff at the beginning of this. In regards to the, sort of a hold harmless, I think that it's gonna be the details. It's gonna be, who signs it? When do they sign it? Where is it held? Is it in zoning? Or is it as simple as the building department? I think because of how we're structured with plus, we think of building and planning all as one thing, but they really are, in reality, they're kind of two things. You've got sort of administrative tasks, which are the building department and those issues, and then we've got a planning department. So I think, if we think of those separately, maybe that hold harmless is parked, in the building department rather than a zoning, and maybe it's something different. And so I don't have the answer to that, but I think we have to think of it a little that way. And the other part is, it's more than just where does a house get built. Some of the hold harmless is result of state laws, rules that we're required. If a road goes away, we're required to give the people a road. If the road had utilities in it, we're required to bring those utilities again. Well, we don't want, as a town, how can you do that? So or you can do it, but it's gazillion dollars. So I think it's not just a single building. We have to think of it from, holistically from the macro level of, sort of, we've had to replace Sheep Pond Road 2 times. We're very lucky that didn't have tar and, a lot of other utilities in it. Or, I don't know how we would have done it, how we would have justified it. So those are there's more to the hold harmless than just a single dwelling. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So it sounds like we may be continuing this. It sounds like we may be, well, to me anyway, need more time to read through this and understand it. Is that sort of the feeling of the group? Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I was going to give you a thumbs up on that. I lost the thought. I'll come back. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, go ahead, Sarah. Yep.
Sorry, is there a specific timeline? Like, do we want this? Is there something that we need to have this ready for? I guess is my question.
Go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, that brings us to the next agenda item. So I would say if you want to read, I can, if it's easier, I can send you what is on the screen right now and maybe in Word format instead of PDF if you want to make edits or whatever.
That'd be
So
good.
yeah, I would suggest maybe continuing this until the next meeting. And at that next meeting, then you can refine these suggestions and hopefully finalize them to bring us to the, the end of the year into the new year. And then that will facilitate the next agenda item. So I don't know if we want to jump to
Yeah.
that right now or not. So
Well, that sounds great. And in the interest of time, you put that into a Word document, Leah, and that'll help us all a lot. Then we'll take it away and I'll do our homework. And we could, unless anyone else has anything else to say on this, and I don't see anything, we could just move to the next agenda item, which definitely has relevance to this one. Discussion and vote on a coastal resilience advisory committee member to work with an internal group on proposed zoning bylaw update, which when I heard about this between the October 22nd meeting and this meeting, I'm like, oh, this is great. It's a great idea. So Leah, why don't you tell us about it?
yeah, sure. So the idea is, like I just explained, once you refine your suggestions and get your finalized list, then an internal work group would be made up. And so it would consist of like one CRAC member, one planning board, this is hypothetical, one planning board member, and then the associated staff for it. So me, and then whoever's in the plus building, that would be appropriate. And that internal group would meet to discuss your recommendations and how can they be incorporated into an updated zoning bylaw. It wouldn't be for this town meeting, it would be for ATM 2026. And that internal work group would figure out how to incorporate it. Once everyone comes to consensus, it would go to planning board to look over and develop, update that zoning bylaws, whatever it may come out of it. And then that would go to town meeting to be voted on.
So in effect, this is sort of a hybrid of what what Gary had suggested of, just handing it over to the planning board and having them do it. They're going to have one of us on there, and that person will be, we'll speak through that person to this internal group, and the group will work out what we want with their advice. It saves them having to attend one of our meetings all the time as we work through it. And all the experts will be in one room. Then our committee member will come back to us and report, and we'll speak to them, and they'll go back. And I thought it was a great idea. Go ahead, Matt.
No, it's a great idea. This is like having a steering committee for a comprehensive or a master plan. And if there's only one, then you're not worried about the quorums. I think it's a great idea because then the staff can get into the actual details, which we don't have the time and the opportunity to do. This allows them to do that without going awry of public meeting laws, etc. So this is a really good idea. Thank you.
It's essentially an expanded staff meeting. Go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that this is generally what happens with bylaws and zoning, and this is nothing new. Like, we're not doing anything out of the ordinary. This is generally the process. So just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Would anybody like to be on this committee? I could think of one person who'd be great at it. He's wearing a striped shirt.
I think it's
You have any
structured.
Oh, okay. Do you have any interest, Doug?
I'm very interested, obviously. It's a matter of, time and bandwidth
Right.
and all that stuff, which I know everybody feels. But conceptually, I would love to be involved, if for no other reason than it would just be a great learning experience. And judging from the vast amount of interest that this group showed in being a co-secretary, I don't imagine there's going to be a long line of other people ready to jump in. Although I would look at Mr. Beller as one possible candidate. Because if memory serves, Gary had one concern with being co-secretary, which is technical skills. And in this case, I don't think you need any computer skills, Gary. Just saying.
I
Go
beg
ahead,
to,
Tim.
I beg to differ. You need computer skills. I've been cutting and pasting all morning. By the way, I think I can handle the minutes probably. So if that's your issue, Doug, don't worry about it. I might not be very timely, but I think I can get them done.
That's fine on the timeliness. And I don't imagine they're going to be meeting every week, Doug. It might only be once a month.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be the crush of twice a month. So
yeah. So I guess I'd be happy to volunteer then. Thanks, Tim, for being the man on that, and I will be happy to do that if the rest of the group feels that's appropriate.
let me just make sure if there's someone else sitting there that is going, oh, I wanted to do that. So everyone's looking at their phones, so they're looking away. It's okay. I think you're perfect for the job, Doug. You have great perspective and dedication to this committee. So you're going to give us what they tell. You're going to be great.
Thank you. I would only add that my guess is that each one of those bullets on Leah's list is going to involve a lot of work. So it's not just one page of bullet points and we'll be done. I imagine that each one of those is going to sort of spider web out into further research and whatnot. On that topic, Leah, I guess if I could ask through Gary to you, if you could just nudge Vince, because I think he had suggested that he knew where to find that state law relating to limited liability or waivers. And I've yet to be able to find it myself. So if you could dig that up, I think that would be helpful. Thanks.
And so we may need more than a few meetings. Once we know that the group has been formed, and Leah, and then they've decided on their first meeting, then that would give us a target for by which time we would refine the list. Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, like when we were first talking about the list, and Leah was saying it's not in a hierarchy and we could just be bullets, that felt comfortable. But in hearing what you were just saying, Doug, I was thinking maybe we should look at it almost not in a priority necessarily, but if it's, because as you said, I do agree with you, like each of those bullets could be a big lift, and my assumption is they'll go one at a time. And so I don't know if there is a priority or preference as to which gets handled first. But that's just thinking out loud.
Agreed. First, maybe some administrative stuff. Leah, we need someone do we need a vote to say Doug is going to be our representative? Nice car.
Doug, did you want to share your screen?
I didn't mean to share my screen. I'm sorry
Okay.
about that. That's totally, I don't know how to get out of it. Oh, stop share. There we go.
Yeah.
I was trying to minimize that screen. Sorry about that.
Peter, yes, there should be a vote
It's a
for
nice.
Doug to be on the internal work group.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion that Doug represent CRAC on this internal work group?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, moved by Tim Brain and seconded by Matt Fee. Roll call vote. Sarah Boyce,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
Aye.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
I,
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Doug Rose,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Great. Thank you very much, Doug. Okay, so I guess our instructions are to just work on this list and go wild. Break off, take one and see how far that goes and how many suggestions, how many things you can add to that. Don't feel restrained except by time.
Add
And
questions.
add
Right.
questions,
Yeah.
whatever you think goes in there, everything you can think of. And we'll talk about it at the next meeting, but I would say that until we know when the internal group's first meeting is, that you've got more than just, until the next meeting. Okay. All right, go ahead, Leah.
Just a clarifying question. Is the committee going to be numbering those by priority or just bullet? Just so I know when I put them together.
You mean when we finally turn it all in?
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say number it by priority.
Okay.
But for now, just, you're going to be doing your rough work and writing everything out, and then you refine it down to priority. Okay. Recap on discussion with Acclimate about Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee's outreach social media campaign. So are you going to say it, Leah, or should I?
You can, and then I can jump into.
Okay. So it seems like the town is redoing its do I say social media or do I say public outreach strategies? And basically they're kind of putting us off. Is that right?
Not really. The communications office is working with a consultant to create a town-wide communication plan. And so in that, there'll be like procedures and protocols for working with other or non-town agencies as far as, social media, outreach stuff, etc. So we met with the communications office and with Ava from Acclimate to discuss the potential plan to work with Acclimate to develop those short videos for social media. The communications office has reached out to their consultants because they're creating this plan. They don't want to just sort of do like a one-off. So they want that whatever procedures put in place that we follow that. So we're just kind of in the waiting process right now. Ava has decided that because they already have funding until the end of the year, they're going to still create these works in progress that are not associated with CRAC. Although some of you CRAC members who she's already done these works in progress will, she'll reach out to you, like Sarah and Jen, to do things, but she's not going to ask you like, why are you on CRAC? It's not CRAC related, although it may be, there might be some coastal resiliency overlap, which is fine. So just, yeah, we're kind of in the waiting process right now. Hopefully we can get the okay and start these videos and the recaps on the CRAC meetings.
And do you know how long we're going to wait? I mean, will it?
She didn't give a timeline. We met with her, was that 2
Okay.
weeks ago, last week? So I'll check in every so often.
Because my memory's telling me that there was a date, November 15th. What was that date?
I don't know.
Something about her being back in the office or having that done by or something like that.
I don't know. I'll have to check in.
Okay. All right. So we don't really have anything to do on, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks. I just so you guys know, I did meet with Ava last week because she asked about videoing me, and then when when she came, she told me a little bit about how they were sort of stalled so that it wasn't crack specific, but because in my professional work, I also work in this area, like it was sort of more generalized. And I think it's really unfortunate that because we had so much momentum for our social media and the work that we put out and all the work that Doug has done, that it has to be stalled because the town is using off-island social media people. And I don't know, I just feel like, I just wanted to say to this group, I feel like we finally made some progress, and we even have Acclimate willing to, you know, putting money in their budget to work with us through the end of January, and now we can't. And it just spoke volumes to me about, I understand that everything that the town puts out has to be kind of like under this bigger umbrella and everything has to work seamlessly together or whatever, but I feel like that stalls us in being able to put information out in a timely manner too. So I don't know if I know, well, I do know that with like when we were talking about our social media campaign before, we had talked about obviously sharing information through our different groups that we have access to. If that is still possible, are we able to like tag the natural resources department and then they can share it? Like if it can't officially come from crack, or just so people, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out ways that we can still kind of, or maybe outside of social media, other ways that we can continue the education and outreach pieces. And I don't know if you've had thoughts about that, Leah.
Thanks, Sarah. Go ahead, Leah.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so there were a number of organizations that said that they would put coastal resiliency things related into their newsletters, and a couple of them did that, like when we first asked them. But although I will say the Land and Water Council, RJ, thank you, put an update in their newsletter. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, about what you all have been talking about with the zoning bylaw updates. But the other organizations haven't really reached out, or, you know, haven't kept up with putting coastal resiliency info into their newsletter. So that could be a potential avenue. I could use help with that. And then, yeah, if you're sharing, you know, some coastal resilience related stuff, feel free to tag the natural resources, or, you know, maybe we can collaborate on something. Yeah, but that being said, the natural resources account still falls under like the town communications plan.
So could we continue our weekly posts on Thursdays without?
Yeah, I've been doing that on
Okay.
Thursdays, or if it's not on Thursday, there is a post during the week that's related to coastal resiliency on the natural resources page.
But you could assign us, you know, right through whenever we think this is going to be resolved, topics to create posts for, so we're all still engaged.
Sure.
And thinking about it. That'd be one thing anyway. Then that'd be okay, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Everybody game for that? Okay. So does that mean that Ava's gonna eventually be contacting each of us for our interviews, but not necessarily with a coastal resilience slant, or not necessarily with a crack slant?
She was gonna just contact, I think, the few members that have already worked with her,
Okay.
that, you know, in their professional career works with some realm with coastal resiliency. So right now we're just sitting tight until we hear back from the communications office if they give us the go for everyone to be interviewed. So I'll update when I have more information.
Okay. All right, sounds good.
I'm a little confused, Peter.
Okay, Gary, go ahead.
Why would she be interviewing us if it has nothing to do with our membership on crack?
Well, since the town is working to refine this policy, and they don't have it the way they want it, So we can't, it doesn't make sense for us to go full bore under what exists now until the town says, okay, good, these are the parameters. This would be her best effort to try and get the message out for us. Sarah?
Yeah, thanks. Just through you, Pete, to Gary, when I met with Ava last week, she said it was kind of like she had already kind of planned out that like we were going to meet. And so she had it be more about me, like my opinions about the importance of coastal resiliency. And she didn't mention crack, but it was like the questions were just about like, basically could have been me as a citizen saying the exact same thing. And it wasn't about what we're doing. It's just about like, what do you think about, you know, and I think I think it was her effort to continue just to still get the footage. And I don't know when she's going to post it or anything like that, but it would be about me. And then, probably through my work, I mean, I don't know if I would have taken the time to do it if I had known ahead of time before she got to my office that it was like not going to support crack in a way, but I think it was just, to still get some information out there.
Gary, it's like when somebody from some organization stands up at town meeting and says, I'm not speaking on behalf of this organization. I'm speaking as a citizen. So I know there's a little bit of a, all right, yeah, right. I mean, I know you're speaking as a citizen, but my mind connects you to that organization. So, but just to further our cause as much as we can, keep active, keep getting the word out until the town says, okay, here are the parameters, and then we go, I guess is what we're saying. I know, it's a little hokey, but.
I don't consider myself an ordinary citizen, but maybe I am.
I don't think any of us are. Okay, do we have any other comments? No, okay. Discussion on canceling the next scheduled meeting for Tuesday, November 26th. How many of us think that the 26th will conflict with our Thanksgiving travel plans or Thanksgiving? 3, 4. Just putting up your hand because you don't want to meet, but that's all right.
Peter, it's the day that the Whalers are playing at Fenway Park. The boat leaves at 10:30.
Oh, okay.
This is a big day for Nantucket.
Okay, I won't be going to that, but it's legit. It's legit. Sorry, I didn't know that. Why are they playing at Fenway Park?
The Island Cup is at Fenway Park this year.
How did that happen?
We got invited, but as a mom of number 20, I need to be there.
Okay, I don't think we need to take a vote, so unless you guys want to. Oh, okay.
I encourage anyone else to go too.
Okay, so no meeting on the 26th of November. The new business committee and natural resources department reports from planning board, conservation commission, harbor and shellfish advisory board, select board, advisory committee of non-voting taxpayers and other committees. I'll go first and say that we do now have a planning board representative that will be our next meeting, and that's Dave Iverson from the planning board. So we'll be adding somebody, and that's great. Anybody else under this heading have anything to say?
Just a question, Leah, when is the planning board, when is the select board going to receive your report on our last quarter?
Gary, I'm not sure. So I send it to town administration and then they put the agenda together. So I'm not sure when it will be, but I can let you know.
Yeah, well, after that presentation, you send me a copy of that again, and I'll send it to the advisory committee for the non-voting taxpayers, like I did in the past, to keep them up to date.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead, Joanna. You're muted, Joanna.
I think that's a really great point. So I would like to share also that report with the finance committee. So if you could send that to me, that would be really great, because otherwise they don't get this information. So I would like to do that. And also, I don't know if, I mean, maybe it should go to any other committees that we have representatives on this, like the Capcom, right? Christie should send it to his committee too, because I think it's valuable for the other town committees to see what we're doing, and same for Conservation Committee, that representative should send the report to that body as well.
Definitely. Leah?
I have a question for the other committees. Is there a section like we have new business for updates for those other committees? Is there a section like that that the representatives can give updates?
Yes,
There is.
we do on the Finance Committee, yes.
Okay. So you would like to give a verbal update and also the
Share
presentation?
this, yes. I can
Okay.
send this in advance to the chair, and then it can be, like, if people have then it will be distributed, and then if people have questions, they can ask.
And it can also be as an agenda item. It could be
Sure.
it could be new
Yep.
business. You know, I
Correct.
think the planning board at the bottom of their agenda, it says other business. So other business is basically anything else. So it can be put anywhere toward the end of the meeting.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, and I don't know if any of the other organizations on this call, but I would like to share this with the board of directors at the Mariah Mitchell Association as well, because I think that, you know, the more that we share our message and what we're working on, the more the rest of the community starts to understand what's happening here.
Yeah, the more the better. Absolutely. Great. Thanks, Joanna. Thanks, Gary. Anyone else under this heading? Okay. Since we're not meeting on the 26th, what is the next meeting, Leah?
It'll be December 10th.
Whoa, okay. December 10th, a month away. Okay.
And then the next one would be December 24th. So it looks like you'll just have one meeting in December if you
I think you
decide
should
to cancel Christmas Eve.
I think we just have another meeting right after that on December 11th, you know? No? Okay. I definitely won't be here December 24th. Okay, well, that's it. Anything else? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Sarah
Aye.
Boyce,
Aye.
Joanna Roach,
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Jen Carberg,
Aye.
Doug Rose,
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Thanks, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.